Ex-husband pulls ex-wife into a dangerous game of deceit. What are they hiding from each other? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main characters. Jake had always been the kind of man who kept his emotions tightly locked away. It had been years since he and Emily divorced, but their past still haunted him in ways he couldn't explain. It wasn't that he still loved her, no, it was something deeper. The secrets they shared, the lives they built and tore apart together, all still lingered like ghosts in the back of his mind. But today, everything was different. Today, he would confront the one person who knew all of his darkest secrets, Emily. Emily, on the other hand, had spent years building a life far from the wreckage of their marriage. After the divorce, she had promised herself she would never look back. Jake was part of her past, a chapter she closed long ago. Or so she thought. When Jake reached out, asking her to meet, Emily didn't hesitate to ignore his calls. But there was something in his voice that made her pause, an urgency, a desperation she couldn't ignore. She agreed to meet him, knowing well that it would stir up old feelings, but not expecting the storm that would come with it. The cafe where they agreed to meet was quiet, a perfect place for an unexpected reunion. As Emily walked in, her eyes immediately found him sitting at a table by the window. He looked the same, older, more worn, but still unmistakably Jake. There was a moment of silence as they both took in the sight of one another, the years of separation not enough to erase the weight of their shared history. Emily sat down, trying to maintain her composure. She could feel the tension building between them, thick enough to cut with a knife. Jake's eyes didn't leave hers as he spoke, his voice low but steady. There's something I need to tell you, something you won't believe. Emily raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. I didn't ask you here to rehash the past. I didn't ask you here to get back together, he said quickly, as if sensing her immediate defensiveness. There's something happening, something dangerous, and I need your help. Emily wasn't sure whether to laugh or be concerned. She had no idea what kind of game Jake was playing, but something about his tone told her this wasn't a joke. Dangerous? She repeated, her voice tinged with skepticism. Jake leaned forward, his gaze intense. You don't understand. We're both in this. Whatever happens next, we're in it together. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She could see the fear in his eyes, and for the first time in years she felt a flicker of doubt. What was Jake hiding from her? What had he gotten them both tangled up in? She couldn't yet know, but one thing was certain, this wasn't just a meeting to clear the air. Something was coming, and it would change everything. I'm glad you agreed to meet me, Jake said, his voice low, almost hesitant. Emily could see the tension in his eyes, the fear that had been absent in their previous encounters. It made her uneasy, but she couldn't help but be curious. She had seen this side of him once before, during their marriage. The side that hid something deeper, something he never fully revealed. It was part of why their marriage had crumbled, but now, it seemed like it was the very reason he was pulling her back into his life. The cafe around them buzzed with quiet conversations, but for Emily and Jake, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. What is it, Jake? She asked, her voice calm, though her heart was pounding. Jake shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming on the table nervously. It's complicated, he said. It's about the past, about something we both thought was over. But it isn't. It never was. Emily frowned. The cryptic way he was speaking only made her more anxious. You're not making sense, she said. What are you talking about? He leaned closer, his eyes scanning the room before locking onto hers. Do you remember the house? He asked. Emily's stomach tightened. The house. It had been their first home together, the place where they had shared so many memories, both good and bad. It was also the place where their marriage had fallen apart. Emily had tried to forget about it after the divorce. She never wanted to think about that house again. But hearing Jake mention it brought a flood of memories crashing back. "What about it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake hesitated, then spoke in a low, urgent tone. "The house is not what you think. There's something hidden there. Something I didn't tell you before." Emily's mind raced. What could he possibly be talking about? They had both moved on from that chapter in their lives. Why was he bringing it up now? "What are you saying?" she asked. "Jake, what's really going on?" He sighed, a deep, heavy sigh, as though he had been carrying this burden for too long. "There's a reason why I had to leave so suddenly," he said. "There's a reason I never told you the truth about the house. And now, Emily, it's coming back to haunt us." Emily's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just about the house, it was about something bigger. Something she wasn't ready to face. "Jake, you're scaring me," she admitted. She could feel the fear rising in her chest, mixing with the confusion and disbelief. "You need to tell me what's going on. Right now." Jake opened his mouth to speak, but then stopped, his expression shifting. He looked over her shoulder, his eyes narrowing. Emily followed his gaze, but saw nothing unusual. When she turned back to Jake, his face had gone pale. "We're not alone," he muttered. "Someone's watching us." "I'm not sure what you mean," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly as she turned back to Jake. His eyes were wide, scanning the cafe, his hands clenched in tight fists. She followed his gaze, but saw nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual customers going about their business. But something in Jake's expression told her that something was very wrong. "Jake, you're scaring me," Emily whispered. She reached out to touch his arm, trying to steady him, but he pulled away before she could make contact. "It's not just here," Jake said, his voice barely audible, as if speaking any louder would bring more attention. "There. Everywhere." Emily felt her chest tighten. Who was he talking about? Who was he so afraid of? She tried to remain calm, but the fear building inside her made it harder to breathe. "Jake, stop. You need to tell me what's going on," she said, her voice more forceful this time. "You're talking in riddles." Jake looked at her, his face pale, his eyes wild with panic. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped, his gaze darting to the door as it opened. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was someone really following them? She felt her anxiety spike, but she forced herself to stay calm. It was then that she noticed something strange. There was a man standing near the entrance, his back to them. He wasn't paying attention to anyone around him, but there was something off about the way he stood. He seemed too still, too out of place. "Who is that?" Emily asked in a low voice. Jake didn't respond at first. He just stared at the man, his jaw clenched. Then, after a long pause, he turned back to Emily, his voice almost inaudible. "That's the person I've been running from," he said. "And now they know where I am." Emily's stomach lurched. This was all too much. The man in the cafe, the fear in Jake's eyes, it was all too surreal. "Jake, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you warn me about this?" Jake swallowed hard, his face tense. "Because I couldn't. I never thought it would come to this. I never thought they would come after us." He looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't want you to be dragged into this. But now, it's too late. They're already here." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. It was hard to wrap her head around what Jake was saying. She had no idea who they were, or why Jake was so terrified. But one thing was clear, this was no longer a simple meeting between ex-husband and ex-wife. This was something much darker, and much more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "Jake, what's really going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the man near the door, who had now turned to face them. The man's eyes locked onto Jake's and For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Emily felt a shiver of unease travel up her spine. Whatever this was, it was only just beginning. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the man near the door. The tension in the air was thick, and she could feel the weight of Jake's fear pressing down on her. "Jake, what's going on?" she asked again, her heart racing. Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up, his movements slow and deliberate, as though every action was calculated. His eyes never left the man near the entrance. "We need to leave," Jake said, his voice tight with urgency. Emily stood up, too, instinctively following his lead. Her mind was spinning with confusion and fear. Who was this man? What did he want with Jake? She couldn't make sense of any of it. But Jake's expression, his panic, it all felt too real to ignore. "Jake, who is he?" Emily asked again, trying to steady her breathing. Jake glanced at her, his eyes dark with worry. "His name is Marcus," he said quietly. "He's the one who's been after me." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Marcus. The name sent a wave of dread through her. "After you?" she repeated. "What do you mean?" Jake didn't look at her as he spoke. "I can't explain everything right now. Just trust me, Emily, we need to get out of here. Now." The words hung in the air, heavy and urgent. But before Emily could respond, Marcus took a step toward them. He moved slowly, but there was a coldness in his eyes that sent a shiver down her spine. Emily felt her pulse quicken. She had no idea what was going on, but she could sense the danger now. Jake was right, they had to leave. As they made their way toward the door, Marcus spoke. "Leaving so soon?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost mocking. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she turned to face him. His presence was unnerving, like something out of a nightmare. He was tall, with a sharp, calculating look on his face. His eyes didn't leave Jake as he spoke. "You've been running for a long time, Jake," Marcus continued. "But you can't hide forever." Jake didn't respond. He simply kept his eyes on Marcus, his jaw clenched. Emily could feel the tension building between them. It was as if the air itself was charged with electricity. She had no idea what kind of game they were playing, but she could tell it wasn't one she wanted to be a part of. "What does he want, Jake?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible. Jake finally turned to her, his face filled with regret. "It's too late," he said softly. "He's already got what he wanted." Emily's stomach twisted. She didn't know what that meant, but it didn't sound good. Marcus took another step closer, his smile thin and cold. "You can't escape this, Jake," he said, his voice low. "The game is over." Emily felt a wave of panic rising within her. Whatever this was, it was far beyond her control. She looked at Jake, her mind racing. He was still holding on to his secrets, and now, it seemed, they were coming to a head. As Marcus took another step toward them, Emily realized she had no choice but to follow Jake into whatever dark path this was leading them down. "I'm not running anymore," Jake muttered, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze fixed on Marcus. The man's cold smile never faltered, but the tension in the air was palpable. Emily could feel it creeping up her spine, a chilling reminder that nothing about this situation was normal. The cafe, once a safe, familiar place, now felt like a cage. She stood frozen, her mind racing. "Jake, what's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jake's eyes flicked to her, his face grim. "It's not over, Emily. Not by a long shot," he said, his words weighed down by the heaviness of the moment. "They never let go. Once they're in, there's no way out." Emily's stomach tightened. Who was Jake talking about? What was he so afraid of? Her mind was spinning, and she could feel the walls closing in. She looked back at Marcus, who was still watching them, the same cold expression etched onto his face. She didn't know if he was a friend or a foe, but the way he moved, the way he stood, every inch of him screamed danger. The tension in the room was so thick that it felt like she could cut it with a knife. Jake was right, though. She had no choice but to follow him. If she stayed, she'd be stuck in the middle of this nightmare. But if she left with Jake, there was no telling what they were walking into. "What do you mean, they?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though the fear in her chest was growing by the second. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but then stopped, his attention snapping back to Marcus, whose slow, deliberate steps brought him closer to them. "You think you can run, Jake?" Marcus said, his voice low and cold. "You can't escape your past. No one can." Jake didn't flinch. He didn't even move. But Emily could feel the weight of his words. Whatever this was, whatever Marcus had come for, it wasn't something that could be easily outrun. Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. "Jake, what's going on? Please, just tell me. I can't keep doing this. Not without knowing what's happening," she pleaded. Her heart was racing, her hands trembling, but she refused to look away from Marcus. He was getting too close. She couldn't let him take them back into the chaos Jake had been running from. Jake finally turned to her, his expression filled with regret and fear. "It's my past, Emily. It's the reason we divorced," he said softly. "I never wanted you involved. But now there's no way out. Not for either of us." Emily's mind was reeling. She didn't know if she should be angry, terrified, or something in between. But one thing was clear, this was far from over. As Marcus stepped closer, the air between them thickened. "I don't need you to explain," Marcus said with a sneer. "I just need you to understand that it's too late." Jake's jaw tightened. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but I'm not giving up without a fight." Emily had no idea what kind of fight Jake was talking about, but she knew one thing for certain, she was in deeper than she ever could have imagined. Whatever this game was, she was no longer a spectator. She was a player. And there was no turning back. "I'm not going to let him win," Jake muttered under his breath, his eyes locked on Marcus as if daring him to make the next move. Emily, standing beside him, felt a rush of uncertainty flood through her. She had never seen Jake this way, so determined, so ready to confront whatever was coming. But she couldn't shake the fear gnawing at her stomach. The words, "too late," echoed in her mind, making her question everything she thought she knew about this situation. Jake had always been a man of secrets, but now, it seemed those secrets were about to unravel in a way either of them could control. Marcus was still closing the distance between them, his cold smile never wavering, his eyes sharp as they flicked between Jake and Emily. "You really think you can stand against this, Jake?" Marcus's voice was low, almost mocking, but there was a hint of something else, something darker. Emily could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air, like the calm before a storm. "Whatever this is, it's over," Marcus said, his gaze now fixed on Emily. "You're both in this, whether you like it or not." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what he was talking about. "Jake," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What's happening?" But Jake didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at Marcus as though waiting for something to break. And then, in a voice that was almost too quiet to hear, he spoke, barely moving his lips. "It's not over. Not yet." Emily's mind was spinning, trying to make sense of the chaos around her. She wanted to understand, to find a way out of this mess, but nothing made sense. The man standing before them, Marcus, seemed to be holding all the cards, and Jake was just one step behind, running out of time. "What do you want from us?" Emily asked, trying to steady her voice, though her words trembled with fear. Marcus's smile only grew wider. "I don't want anything," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I just want you to understand the truth. The game is bigger than both of you, and it's been going on for a long time. It's just a matter of time before it all comes crashing down." Jake's jaw clenched at Marcus's words, but he didn't flinch. Emily could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. She wanted to reach out to him, to ask him to explain, but she was afraid that whatever he said would pull her deeper into the web of lies and deceit they were already tangled in. She could feel the air growing heavier, the tension between the three of them thick enough to suffocate. "You don't know what you're getting into," Jake said finally, his voice steady but filled with an edge of desperation. "This isn't something you can just walk away from." Marcus raised an eyebrow, amused. "I'm not the one running, am I?" he replied, his tone taunting. Jake took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Marcus. "We're done here," he said firmly, his voice no longer shaking. "You don't control me. You never did." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The words Jake spoke had a weight to them, a finality that left her breathless. She wasn't sure where this was all headed, but she knew one thing for certain: things were about to get much more complicated. "I'm not afraid of you," Jake said, his voice now steady, a hard edge to his words. Emily could feel the tension rising as he took another step forward, facing Marcus without flinching. She had never seen him like this before, so sure of himself, as if he was finally standing tall after years of running. It was as though something inside him had shifted, and he was no longer the man who had been haunted by his past. For the first time, he seemed to be confronting it head-on. Marcus, however, didn't seem intimidated. His cold smile remained, but there was something in his eyes that made Emily shiver. He wasn't backing down. "You think you're in control now," Marcus said, his voice smooth, dripping with sarcasm. "But you're not. Neither of you are." Emily's stomach twisted at his words. What did that mean? What game was Marcus playing, and why was Jake so involved in it? She couldn't keep up. The whole situation was spiraling out of control, and she was being pulled deeper into something she didn't understand. What happened next could change everything. What did Jake know that Marcus didn't want her to find out? Jake's eyes didn't leave Marcus's face as he spoke again, his voice low but filled with resolve. "I'm not running anymore. It's time to face the truth." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You think you can just face the truth and everything will magically go away?" he asked, his voice tinged with mockery. "The past doesn't work like that. You can't just walk away from it. You can't change what's been done." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. As she listened to the exchange between them, there was something in Marcus's words, something that resonated with her. She didn't want to believe it, but what if Jake's past was darker than she ever imagined? She turned to Jake, her voice barely a whisper. "What does he mean, Jake? What's going on?" Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on Marcus, his jaw clenched. He looked like a man who had already made up his mind, a man who was finally ready to confront whatever was waiting for him. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being left in the dark. She needed answers, and she needed them now. "Tell me the truth, Jake," she pleaded, her voice filled with urgency. Jake looked at her then, his expression softening just a fraction. "I wish I could, Emily," he said quietly. "But it's not that simple. The truth, it's not something you can just walk into. It's something that has to be earned. And even then, you might not like what you find." Emily felt a knot tighten in her chest. What was he talking about? Why was everything so cryptic? She didn't know what kind of truth Jake was hiding, but she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, the uncertainty hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Marcus was still watching them, waiting for something. She didn't know what he was expecting, but it didn't feel like a game anymore. It felt real. And it felt dangerous. Whatever was about to happen, Emily had a feeling that she was in it now, whether she was ready or not. "I'm done hiding," Jake said, his voice firm, resolute. He stood tall now, facing Marcus as though the weight of the past no longer had a hold on him. For the first time since they'd met, Emily saw a man who wasn't running from something, but running toward it, toward whatever was about to unfold. But there was still so much she didn't understand. Every word Marcus spoke, every cryptic comment from Jake, left her more confused and fearful than before. What was this truth they kept referring to? Why was Jake so sure that facing it was the only way forward? The silence that followed Jake's declaration was thick, charged. Marcus didn't move. He simply stared at Jake, his expression unreadable, almost detached. It felt as though he was waiting for something, for Jake to falter, for him to reveal his fear. But Jake didn't flinch. The man had finally decided to face whatever was coming, and Emily was left to wonder if that would be enough to protect them both. Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice a low drawl. "You really think this ends with you standing tall, don't you?" he asked. "That's cute. But the past doesn't let go so easily." Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest. What was he talking about? What was so dangerous about Jake's past that it had brought them both to this point? She had no answers. All she had were questions, and fear. She turned to Jake, her voice barely a whisper. "What is he talking about, Jake? Please, just tell me." Jake's eyes softened, just for a moment. "I can't," he said quietly. "Not yet. But I will. You deserve the truth. But first, we need to get out of here." Marcus wasn't finished, though. He took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving Jake. "You think you can just walk away from all of this?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "You're too deep in, Jake. You can't escape now." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. What was Marcus trying to say? Was this some kind of threat? Or was there something more, something Jake wasn't telling her? She needed answers, but it seemed that the more she pushed, the further Jake pulled away. She had to trust him, even if everything about this situation was making her doubt herself. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to him. "If there's something I need to know, Jake, now's the time to tell me," she said, her voice strong but shaky. He looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I wish it were that simple, Emily. But we don't have time for that right now. Marcus is right about one thing, we can't escape this. We've already been pulled in, and there's no turning back." Emily didn't know what to say. Her mind raced as she tried to process everything that was happening. They were caught in something bigger than they understood, something far darker than she could ever have imagined. And she had no idea how it was going to end. "I don't know how much longer we can keep running," Jake muttered, his voice low as he glanced at Marcus, who was still standing there, waiting for them to make the next move. Emily could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. Everything had been spiraling out of control since that first phone call from Jake, but now, it felt like they were on the verge of something bigger. Something neither of them was prepared for. Jake had been avoiding the truth for so long, and now that it was starting to surface, Emily didn't know what to believe anymore. She had trusted him, believed in him, but as the pieces of this twisted puzzle fell into place, she realized that there were things he had kept hidden from her, things that could destroy everything they had. Marcus took a step closer, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling calm. The way he looked at them made it feel like they were already trapped. "You're not getting out of this," Marcus said quietly, his tone still filled with that cold mockery. "There's no way out. No easy escape." Jake clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't speak. Emily could sense the battle raging inside him, the man who had run for so long, the man who was finally ready to face what was coming. But what if he was wrong? What if this wasn't the end of it? What if the truth was something so terrible that even facing it wouldn't be enough? She looked at Jake, her heart aching. "What are we doing, Jake?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with urgency. He turned to her, and for the first time, Emily saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "I don't know, Emily," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't run anymore. This has to end." Emily didn't know how to respond. She wasn't sure if Jake's resolve was enough to protect them both. She wasn't sure if any of it would matter. She had followed him into this nightmare, and now, there was no turning back. She couldn't stop herself from wondering what the future held, what the truth would really mean for them. The silence between them grew heavier, thick with the unspoken words that neither of them were ready to say. Marcus's presence lingered like a shadow, and Emily could feel his gaze on them, waiting for them to make a move. He was right about one thing, they couldn't keep running forever. But the question was, what would they do when the truth finally came to light? Emily reached for Jake's hand, her fingers trembling. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together," she whispered, her words a promise. Jake squeezed her hand, his grip tight, as if drawing strength from her touch. Together, he repeated, his voice firm. Together. But as they turned to face Marcus, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was only just beginning. Whatever was waiting for them in the coming days, it was going to test them in ways they couldn't yet understand. And no matter how hard they tried, there was no escaping the truth that would eventually catch up with them.